Welcome all to the 2020 most powerful military forces in the world. Some ground rules. All military forces are counted. No paramilitary forces will be counted because we don't know the difference between country A and B and how they have their paramilitary forces. The level of training experience, these are definite factors in this ranking. Remember, these are just my thoughts. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. Also, no equipment in deep storage will be counted. An example of that is Russia. They have over 10,000 tanks in deep storage, but they're basically just sitting there rotting away. It could take months, hundreds of thousands of civilian contractors or soldiers, maybe even years to get this equipment up to a functional standard. So we're not going to count equipment in deep storage. Now, the way I use some of my terminology, combat support brigades, it's not the real technical version of it, but I just made it up to make it easier for this video. So I combined combat aviation brigades, field artillery brigades, ADA brigades, and anti-tank brigades into combat support brigades. And then I also have this another terminology called enabler brigades, basically support units that support combat maneuver brigades. I include those logistical, engineer, signal, NBC, military intelligence, military police, basically those type of units. And some more, they're going to be in my enabler brigades. So let's get started with the ranking itself. First up, North Korea. They didn't make the cut. Now, they do have some things on their side. They have a huge military. I don't count none of their paramilitary. So the active military is about 1.2 million soldiers, almost 1.3. They only have 600,000 military reserves. Now people say, oh, but they got millions and millions. If you really look at it, it's mostly just their paramilitary, and it's basically any adult in their country they have listed as military. But we all know that every adult can't serve in the military. And pretty large ground forces, over 285 combat maneuver brigades, 70 combat support brigades. But logistically and the support capabilities, very poor. For all those forces, they only have 9 enabled brigades. Plus, a large part of the North Korean army are farmers that farm to feed themselves and the elites in the government, so not really trained. They have a large military. It's one of the best equipped militaries if this was the late 50s and early 60s, because that's the type of equipment they currently have, which is completely obsolete and is just not made for the modern battlefield. Their Navy is basically non-existent. We have 20 conventional diesel-powered subs, but they're really old, not very good. They have 90 minor coastal and minor warships. Once again, not really good. The 2 frigates they have are ancient. The Air Force is broke up into 4 divisions that cover their country. But most of their Air Forces, other than the 18 MiG-29s they have, is just mostly 1960s, maybe some 70s technology. They're just not ready. Next up, also didn't make the cut, Taiwan. Now they have a military also that's almost 2 million strong. Most of it are their reserves. They're not greatly trained, but they can be called up in case China decides to invade. They have a military budget of $11 billion, which is 1.8% of their GDP. They have 28 major warships, another 65 minor and coastal warships, 4 conventional diesel-powered attack subs. They're currently trying to upgrade all this because now the United States has decided politically to upgrade their forces. Their current army consists of 37 combat maneuver brigades, not a lot of combat support brigades, nice size logistical with 9 enabler brigades. Their tanks are mostly poor and hopeless. They've got a little over almost 1,200 of them. They got another 1,400 armored vehicles. They've got almost 1,900 indirect fire systems. They've got a nice size ADA capabilities. They've got a nice size attack and scout helicopter capabilities. The Air Force is actually probably the best part of their military. It's mostly made up of capable old fighter jets. They've got a nice airborne early warning, command and control capabilities. They also train. They train a lot, 108 hours a year. Like I said, the United States is currently decided to help them upgrade their forces. They're gonna get the newest M1A2 Sec V3s. They're gonna get new fighter jets, new ships, and they're going to actually build some of these. They're technically in the works of building a new attack submarine, so they didn't make it this year. Maybe in the future they will. Now, at number 10, the first one on our list, Egypt. They have a total military slightly less than 1 million personnel. It's almost split 50-50 between active and their reserve or National Guard. Their budget's about $3.3 billion, which is only 1.3% of their GDP. It's got about 48 combat maneuver brigades. They got almost 2,500 modern and capable tanks. They've got another 5,000, almost 500 armored vehicles. They've got almost 2,000 indirect fire systems. Their ADAs on the small side, especially since, I mean, they might sometime in the future go to war with Israel. I doubt it, but I guess that's why they really don't have ADA. Their attack helicopters, actually, even though it's a small number, only 57, it's mostly Apaches, Ds and some Es, so it's a pretty potent force. Their Air Force, the air capabilities, they've got currently 17 modern fighters, which is mostly their French Rafales. They're going to probably buy another 36, 40 of them. They got a fairly large, about 240 capable old fighters. They still have about 120 poor and hopeless jets, but they're slowly fading them out. Now, the issue with the Air Force is they use a lot of different platforms, which require a lot of different maintenance. Don't all use the same weapons platforms, so that's an issue. The naval forces, they're actually improving it. They've improved their amphibious warfare capabilities. When that Russian deal fell through and they picked up those 2 amphibious warfare ships, they got 11 major warships, another 65 coastal, and 6 conventional diesel-powered attack subs. Next up, Turkey. Now, for the purpose of this ranking, because of some political issues, I'm not adding Turkey's forces to NATO. So they're standing on their own. They're coming in my ranking at number 9. They've got a military of about 730 plus total soldiers, half and half, active, half the reserves. They've done a lot of joint training with the United States and other NATO members, which has bolstered their command and control capabilities. And just the way that they fight their war. An example of that is how they're just pestering Syria. They've got 19 major warships, 100 minor and coastal warships, 12 conventional diesel-powered attack subs. They've got nice ASW capabilities with 29 of them. They're currently building 10 warships, one of which will soon be their flagship, an amphibious ship. They also have, they want to build an aircraft carrier in the future. They also have another 11 warships on order. They've got about 41 combat maneuver brigades. They've got almost 3,400 tanks, mostly capable and poor. They've done some modifications to some of these tanks. They also have about 5,400 armored vehicles, almost 2,000 indirect fire systems, almost 80 attack and scout helicopters. The Air Force is mostly made up of capable fighters. They have about 370. They've got the capability of doing command and control in the air. They demonstrate. They also they've started using aerial fuel refueling, which has greatly helped their capabilities. They have 2 military satellites, and their pilots not only train in the United States and abroad, but they're fairly well trained. They get about 180 hours a year. So overall, it's a great force. Next up is number 8. Another Middle East nation, Israel. Overall, they've got about 630 total soldiers. Now, the bulk of it, about 4 out of 5, are reservists. But they pride themselves on being able to stand up their forces in case of a natural emergency very quickly, and then being well trained and very motivated. For such a small nation, they spend about 5% of their GDP on defense, which is $18.5 billion. This includes the aid the United States gives them for the military forces. They have about 45 combat maneuver brigades. They have 1,600 tanks, mostly advanced, modern, and capable. Another 1,300 armored vehicles. They have 1,100 indirect fire systems. For a country so small, they have almost 1,000 ADA units, mostly surface-to-air missiles and a few gun systems. They have attack and scout helicopters, Apache Ds, and some Kiowas. Their Air Force itself, well, let me go back to the Army. Their ground forces are one of the best and trained in the Middle East, if not the best. Well, I should say the best. Their Air Force is also the best Air Force in the Middle East. Not only is their equipment outstanding, but the training and the capability of their pilots is first rate. They currently using the F-35 that everyone says there's issues. Israel doesn't seem to have issue with them. They've been flying circles around the Russian-made S-300 air defense system. They've got 22 of those operational. They've got another 25 modern fighters, another 260 capable fighters, and they're slowly getting rid of the 22 capable old fighters they had. They've got a great electronic and intelligence airborne early warning system. For a country so small, once again, they've got 11 aerial fuel tankers. They've got 12 military satellites, which is just huge for a country of their size. Now, their one weakness and the reason they're ranked so low, their naval forces. They really don't have a conventional navy. It's mostly just made up of minor and coastal warships, a couple corvettes, a couple large patrol ships that have some missiles, 5 attack diesel subs that they use a lot for special forces. They don't really have an anti-submarine warfare capability, with only 7 of those. So that's their biggest drawback. But for them, they're mostly a defensive nation, so I guess they really don't need an offensive navy. Next up, coming in at number 7, Japan. They are greatly expanding their military capabilities. They're taking up the challenge to do the current political environment with the United States is quite simply seems to be pulling back so much, so Japan's going to step up. They spend about $47 billion, or less than 1% of their GDP, on defense. But what that gets them 300,000 total soldiers, of which 247,000 are active. They currently have 17 advanced fighters. They plan on buying more than 100 F-35A and Bs. They've got a capable force with 189 capable fighters. They have 270 capable fighters. The issue is they still have about 51 poor fighters, F-4Es, but they're slowly going to get rid of those as they buy more F-35s, A and Bs. They have a nice size airborne early warning and command and control capabilities, with 39 of them, almost 40. The aerial fuel tank capabilities, they only have 6. They could improve. Their transportation planes, they only have 25. They could improve, but they really don't have a lot of space, so they don't really need it. The military satellites, they've got 11 of them. Very advanced technology. Their pilots, now it's an issue, only average about 150 hours annually for training. They could definitely improve that. Now the naval capabilities, they're greatly expanding those. They've just decided they're going to build basically they're converting 4 amphibious ships to aircraft carriers. Once they're done converting those, basically making their flight decks resistant to be able to handle the liftoff and landing of the F-35s. They'll have 4 aircraft carriers, which will be more than China. Wow. They've got destroyers, they've got frigates, all advanced. They build a lot of their own stuff, great trained forces, and they also have 163 minor and coastal warships, mostly made up of large patrol ships. They have an advanced conventional attack sub capabilities. They just launched one of the most advanced battery powered subs, well, the advanced battery powered sub in the world. Those great capabilities. They have a large anti-submarine warfare capability with 163, which is a direct threat to China's submarine warfare capabilities. They've got 10 mine countermeasure helicopters, once again. a direct threat to China. They're currently building 11 warships or in sea trials, and they have on order another 20. Now, their ground forces, the weakest part of their forces. They've got 17 combat maneuver brigades only, 10 combat support brigades, and 13 enabling brigades, which means it's a well-balanced force on paper, but the issue is they only have less than 700 tanks, mostly advanced and modern. They've got only 900 armored vehicles, 610 indirect fire systems. They've got about 488, which is great because this allows them to defeat anyone who would try to attack them. They've got a great size attack and scout helicopters, 147. The transportation only got 137 transportation. Overall, this is a very modern force. It's not as big as it could be. I mean, they got a huge population. You see, they spend less than 1% of their military. They spent $47 billion. If they really wanted to, they could surge. And they've got a lot of great technology. And they're showing it by converting those 4 amphibious helicopter carriers to aircraft carriers. That's a direct challenge to China. The Republic of Korea. That's the wrong one. The Republic of Korea. They have an active army of 625,000, but they have the capability to surge in a hurry to over 3 million reserves. Now, almost the entire military are draftees or conscripted, however you want to say it. They serve about 2 years, so the level of training is an issue. But for such a geographically small country, they have a huge population. I've been in that country many times. The soldiers are highly motivated. The people are highly motivated. They spend this right here, this country right here spends a lot of money on defense. They spend about 2.4% of their GDP on defense, which comes up to almost $40 billion. This is not your old Korea. They build a lot of their own equipment. Their tanks, their fighter jets, their shipbuilding. Overall, the quality of their forces has raised dramatically. The capability of their forces have raised dramatically. They've got 153 total combat maneuver brigades. They've got over 2,600 tanks, mostly made up of modern and capable tanks. They do still have some M48s, but they're slowly getting rid of those. They've got about 3,100 armored vehicles. They've got almost 5,100 indirect fire systems. Most of this is to counter the North Koreans' capabilities of firing, which they would just use for counter fire. They've got nice size attack helicopter capabilities. They actually have a nice size medium and heavy helicopter transportation capability to be able to move forces. Their ADA is on the small side, but North Korea really don't have a good military. I mean, all you really need is the three. I mean, you can use a spitball, not know some of their planes. They got 340 ADA. Now, their naval forces, they're rapidly expanding those, and this has nothing to do with North Korea. This has an eye towards China. They currently have 31 major warships, 131 minor and coastal warships, 16 diesel-powered attack subs. Their anti-submarine warfare capabilities actually needs to step up a lot. Currently, they're building 8 warships that are under construction or going through sea trials. A lot of destroyers, frigates, amphibious warfare ships. They've also have another 6 warships on order. The Air Force is stepping up. They've got 59 modern fighters, another 213 capable. They still have about 230 hopeless and poor fighters, but they're slowly getting rid of those also. F4s and F5s. They have a great airborne electronic warfare command and control capabilities. Their actual medium transports, they only have 16. Now their pilots come a little somewhat trained, but not as trained as they could be. They're only logging about 140 hours a year. So that's North Korea, number 6. Number 5, India. India has one of the largest militaries in the world, almost 2.6 million personnel, 1.4 of them active, another 1.1 million reserves. Of course, everybody knows it's the second largest population in the world. The actual military spending is almost $58 billion a year, 2.1% of the GDP. The ground forces, they're made up of about 132 combat maneuver brigades. They have almost 3,600 tanks, most of them modern and capable, a large T-90 fleet, and some T-72s. They have 3,400 armored vehicles, another 3,200 indirect fire systems, almost 3,100 ADA. All this force is not to be used. They're not just have this forces for Pakistan. It's, once again, an eye on, you guessed it, China. They have 19 attack helicopters. They really need to step that up. The air forces themselves, they broke up into 5 regional commands. They have 258 modern fighters, another 157 capable. But they still have way too many MiG-23s. Still at 173. They just need to get rid of them. The 175 ground attack fighters, mostly Jaguars, kind of old. For as big as the country is and their capabilities, they only have 6 aerial fuel tankers, not a lot. Transportation is small, only 37 heavy and medium transportation planes. They do have a nice sized military satellite capability with 12. Their pilots do train well and are very competent fighter pilots when it comes to dogfighting. The question is equipment. It's got about 180 hours. Now the naval forces itself are expanding. They've got 29 major warships, 165 minor warships. Their conventional submarine forces, they're expanding their nuclear-powered attack subs, but still mostly just diesel-powered attack subs. They've got 30 anti-submarine warfare helicopters. They really need to step that up. They're currently building another 16 warships, including 2 aircraft carriers. They have another 26 warships on order. So India is definitely building their forces up for the future, and more importantly, building up their capability and the quality of the soldiers themselves, which is the key. Coming in at number 4, Russia. Some people say they should be higher than this. Maybe, maybe not. The active military is only 900,000 soldiers. Of that, a third of them are conscripted and only spend a year in the military. A year is not enough for training. So you basically have a month for basic and a month to get out. In between, you only have 9 months in the military. Those guys really aren't trained. They're just bodies. And that's why you'll see their reserves. Some people say they have a reserve of 2 million, but the numbers don't back that up. They really only have, on paper, 1.5 million reserves, but in reality, it's smaller than that. And those guys really aren't trained, because 99% of those guys are those conscripted soldiers that only spend a year in, which only have 10 months of real service. So I spent 10 months in, another additional month basic, another additional month getting out, and then 5 years later you expect me to retain that information 4 years later? No. Their reserves, they really have to reorganize the way they do their reserves. This reserve force is just made for defensive capability if somebody invaded Russia. These guys would not be good in an offensive or deployed environment. Overall, the order of battle itself, on paper, huge. 89 combat maneuver brigades, 58 combat support brigades, 40 enabler brigades to support their operations, 3,100 tanks, mostly modern and capable. Their main battle tank is a T-72 Bravo 3 modified, and the T-72 Bravo 3. The T-14s, they're just not going to make it. They've got about 14 of them. They might build 200. They probably won't. It's all hype. They can't afford it. The T-80 they're getting rid of because they just can't support the platform. The T-90, they'll build a couple T-90 SMs, but that's pretty much it. The T-72 is their main battle tank. They've got almost 1,500 armored vehicles, a lot of different platforms, which take a lot of different maintenance. That's always an issue. Same thing with their indirect. They use a total of 15 different platforms. All of them don't even use the same rounds. None of them use a lot of the same parts. That is a huge issue. They've got 3100 ADA, mostly SAM, and a few air defense guns. But once again, they use a lot of different platforms, which is a theme with them. But at the same time, this makes their forces less efficient. They've got the world's third largest, by my ranking, third largest attack helicopter capabilities. Once again, they use 5 different platforms, and they're all doing the same job. I could see if they had different jobs, but you're using 5 different platforms for the same job. They got to get away from that. 600 transportation helicopters. Now, we'll get to their Air Force. Now, they've upgraded their Air Force tremendously with equipment. The issue is, once again, they have a lot of different platforms that do basically the same roles. And then these different fighter jets, they're only building 40, 50, 30 of them at a time for each platform. They've got 374 modern fighters, 89 capable fighters. They got 272 capable older MiG-29s, older Su-27s, and older MiG-31s. Their ground attack capabilities, they have about 305 of those. Su-24s and Su-25s. They've got a large bomber fleet, almost 140, but once again, these planes are old, not all. They've got a large ISR, airborne early warning capabilities, C2 control, at about 163. Their biggest weakness, the aerial refueling capabilities. They only have 15 fuel tankers. Most of their fighter jets, or for that matter, most of their air assets can't be refueled in the air. For a country so big, this is a huge hindrance. Not so much on the defense, which lends me to believe that deep down they really are just a defensive force. But on the offense, they really don't have the capabilities to maintain. They can't keep a combat air patrol in there because they don't have aerial refueling. The military transportation, about 190 heavy and medium planes, nice size. They've got a huge military satellite capability with 101. The question is the capability of some of these. Some of these satellites are getting older and older. They've got a large long-range cruise missile capability with over 2,400. For as big as their military is, they only spend $61.5 billion. And they really can't afford to pay that. They've just announced that they're going to cut the spending on their military, which is definitely hurting their logistics, their capability to build new equipment, the capability to maintain equipment. And by them having so many different platforms, it makes it that much harder to maintain their forces. They've got 4 fleets that really can't even support themselves. If one fleet's attacked, the other fleets can't help them because of geographics. And just the nature of the adversaries. Their fleet is basically rotting away. They've got 39 major warships, 12 of which are currently broke down. They've got 4, on paper it's huge. They got 495 minor and coastal warships, but a lot of those are support ships. They really can't build ships anymore. Most of the warships that they're building, which is currently 26, are mostly frigates and below. They're great at building corvettes, but they've had to cancel the aircraft carrier, amphibious warships, destroyers, some of their subs, the different types of subs. I mean, they've got great technology, but they've lost the ability to build and maintain this equipment. They've also got another 26 warships on order, but we'll see how many of those they won't cancel. Coming in at number 3, China. China is really growing the size of their military. Spending almost 100 that we know of. It's probably over $180 billion. Right now it's 1.3% of their GDP. People won't realize, but this isn't your fault. This China. They're not just about a bunch of infantry soldiers. They've really cut the size of the overall size of their military. They're going with quality over quantity. With that said, they still have a military of 2.5 million, so it's still huge. Over 2 million of those are active duty, another 500 are reserves, and they're actually building up the capability of those reserve soldiers. We'll start with their naval forces, which is very impressive. That's why I'm starting with those first. They've got the second largest active military, well, the third largest active military in the world, with a total of 92 major warships, 715 minor and coastal warships, 54 subs. They're building a lot of modern equipment. Now, the anti-submarine warfare capabilities almost non-existent, only 28. They're currently building a lot of ships. They can build pretty much any types of ships. They did just cancel 2 or 3 aircraft carriers, but they're still building a lot of other modern destroyers, frigates, amphibious warfare ships, corvettes, subs. They still haven't mastered the capability of building nuclear power subs. They're basically sticking with the diesel powered because they have technological issues. Currently they're building 29 of those ore and sea trials. They have another 23 warships on order. Their Air Force, they've got about 28 advanced J-20s. Once again, the question is, can it do what they say it can do? It looks good. They're still trying to modernize their overall military. They've got 201 modern fighters, mostly knockoff Russian fighters. They pretty much have almost 300 capable and another 478 capable but old. The issue with their Air Force, they have a lot of different platforms like Russia, plus they have another 640 J8s and J7s. They just got to get rid of them. They're pretty much useless on the modern battlefield. They help build up your numbers, but the cost of maintenance and wasting time training soldiers on them, it's just a waste. I've got 260 ground attack jets, another 190 bombers, but most of those are old and lack real capability. They got a nice size airborne early warning and C2 capabilities. Their electronic warfare jets and planes, they really need to improve that. Like Russia, they just don't believe in aerial fuel tankers. But in a war against an adversary like the United States, that would really hurt them. Their military plane transportation is only 75 for a country and a military as big as theirs. They have 103 military satellites. They've greatly improved their capabilities. Pilots only fly for like 125 hours a year, which is better than Russia's 80, but still not up to standard. Their army, which is still the largest part of their military, they have 175 combat maneuver brigades, another 117 combat support brigades, mostly artillery. They do have a large naval brigades at 70 of them. They've expanded their logistical capabilities to help them possibly be able to do some offensive operations against Russia, India, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan. I mean, it's surrounded by a lot of nations. Their tank force, about 6,300 tanks, mostly advanced, capable, but they still have a large fleet of hopeless tanks. They are upgrading, and soon they will get rid of those, but that's an issue. They have over 10,000 armored vehicles, another 5,000 indirect fire systems. They've got almost 8,000 ADA, mostly SAMs, mostly guns actually, with some SAMs. They've got a nice size attack and scout helicopters. They look familiar. Knockoff. China's been stealing some people's technology. The transportation fleet, as far as helicopters, for medium helicopters, about 314, so that's not bad. Number 2 on our coming in number 2, NATO. Now, NATO, the way I'm calculating this is without the United States and without Turkey. Without those 2 nations, they still have a combined military spending of $278 billion, and that only equals 1.5% of their combined GDP, which means even if they doubled their spending to 3%, they'd spend over $500 billion. And what does that get you? Currently, that that 1.5% gets them, they do a lot of joint training together. They have joint corps. They have joint divisions. They have 150 combat maneuver brigades. They've got 29 combat support brigades. Now, most of their artillery itself, they place those in their combat maneuver brigades, which lower the overall numbers of their field artillery brigades, but they still have a lot of them. They've got 67 enabler brigades, mostly made up of logistics, medical, all types of support assets, engineering, NBC, electronic warfare, signal, aviation. They just have a lot. Their army itself, they have almost 4,000 tanks, mostly advanced, modern, and capable. They've got almost 23,000 armored vehicles. Like I said, they have another 5,500 indirect fire systems. They've got 2,400 ADA, mostly SAMs. They've got 500 attack and scout helicopters, second largest force in the world, with a lot of advanced helicopters. They've got a huge transportation force of helicopters for medium and heavy helicopters to transport troops and other supplies at 1,500. The overall total military, they've got 2.5 million active soldiers, well trained. Their reserve National Guards only made up of about less than 900,000, but they're fairly trained. But they could surge larger than that for a total of almost 3.4 million total soldiers, sailors, and airmen. The Air Force have a total of 65, almost 1,700 fighter jets. They're buying F-35s. They got about 45 of them currently. Most of them still in testing. The UK has an active squadron. They've got 596 modern fighters. French Rafales, Typhoons. So they have a very capable fighting force. They have another 350 capable, another 472 capable, though mostly F-16As and Bs. They still have almost 140 poor and hopeless fighters, but those are mostly fighters from the Eastern Bloc nations that are slowly getting rid of theirs. They ground attack. They've got 144 ground attack planes. They've got 290 transportation heavy and medium planes. They've got nice size electronic warfare capabilities. The aerial, airborne, early warning, command and control capabilities, they don't have a lot, but they're very capable at about almost less than 50. The air refueling is second largest in the world with 53, which gives them the capability of flying almost continuously. Now, they use a lot of different platforms, but surprisingly, a lot of the platforms use a lot of the same munition. That's one of the things NATO has always stressed. A lot of their nations use a lot of the same munition, so that way they can use the ammunition for cross-platform capabilities, which is great because they have a lot of different platforms. But at the same time, they can order basically a few types of munitions. Now, they do fly a lot, about 170 hours, and this is across the entire force. So a lot of NATO countries fly more than that, but some of the eastern and smaller units don't fly. This is the I shouldn't say aggregate. This is the number for the entire Air Force at 170 hours an hour, which is still like 90 hours more than Russia, which is a lot. Their fleets. They've got a huge fleet. They've got one major command for 4 fleets themselves. They've got technically 157 major warships, which is the largest in the world. Now, tonnage, the United States is still heavier because they got a lot of those super carriers. But capabilities, this is a very capable force. They've got aircraft carriers. They've got destroyers. They got frigates. They've got 526 minor and coastal warships. They've got 59 conventional attack subs, 12 of which are nuclear powered attack subs. The remaining are all diesel powered. They've got a huge anti-submarine warfare capabilities at 281. They're currently, as far as procurement, a lot of European NATO nation defense companies that build everything from ships, fighters, to you name it, they do it. Now, they're currently building 26 warships, and they've got another 86 warships on order. This is a very advanced, highly motivated, quality force. That's why they come in at number 2. Surprising a lot of people. A lot of people talk down about NATO. but they really have a lot. Coming in at number one, the United States. Why the United States number one? Well, the biggest thing is they just spend that bread. They spend 3.5% of their GDP, which is over $721 billion. That's a lot. That's more than China, NATO, Russia combined. And that gets them a lot. They have a total military itself of 2.2 million soldiers, one of which almost 1.4 million are active, and another 845 reserve and national guards. Now, their reserve and national guards are probably the best reserve and national guard forces in the world. Not only do they do their regular training, but as whole units and as individuals, they deploy a lot. They've deployed a lot, and they do a lot of joint training throughout the world, in every environment. They have bases everywhere. They have forward deployed. It's the only real nation that can forward deploy forces everywhere continuously in multi-theaters. We'll start with their ground forces. They've got 67 combat maneuvers. So that's not a lot. It's not a lot, but it packs a lot of punch. That includes the Army and the Marine Corps. They've got 58 combat support brigades, of which like 20 plus, like 23 combat air brigades, which have a lot of Apaches, a lot of air capability to wreak havoc on the ground. Where they really just leave the rest of the world is the ability to support and sustain forces in every theater. They've got 153 enabler brigades, most of which are logistical brigades, engineer brigades, NBC, military intelligence, military police, transportation, you name it, they have it. They have the capability to support their forces in every environment, everywhere, almost two different regions at one time. They have pre-positioned equipment everywhere. They have equipment at sea. Like I said, they've got almost 2,900 tanks. Most of them advanced and modern. And next month, the first unit is gonna start getting their M1A A2 Set 3. So they're gonna have their new tanks out there. They've got 1,600 armored vehicles. They've got almost 3,800 indirect fire systems, and the thing is, they don't really use a lot of platforms. So by them not using a lot of platforms, that means they don't have a lot of different parts. They don't have to use a lot of different types of ammunition. They don't need as many types of mechanics. These simple things like this makes your force that much more lethal. They've got 1,200 ADA, a lot of Patriot batteries. They've got the world's largest attack helicopter fleet, 928, mostly Apache E's and D's. They've got the world's largest transportation helicopter capability. Now I count that the Marine Corps' MV-22s in this. They got, like I said, they got over 3,200 of them. Command and control. No country has the type of command and control they have. They've got 7 unified combatant commands, and these are geographical, which are all over the world. So they just put troops in there, and they already have a chain of command. War fighters set up to fight within their region. These guys plan, fight, deploy all types of forces with Allied and U.S. forces, different branches within their geographical area. They have another 4 unified combatant commands that are functional. They've got another 2 sub-commands. USFK Korea is one, and the other one is the forces in Afghanistan. Their Air Force is number 1 in the world. They've got the world's largest advanced fighters, F-35s, F-22s. They got 422 of them. They're going to have over almost 3,000 of them in the next decade. They've got 771 modern fighters, F-15Es, Strike Eagles, F-18Es and Fs. Very modern, capable fighters themselves. They've got another almost 1,500 capable fighters, F-16, F-18, F-15, Cs and Ds. Once again, these are advanced fighters, but they've already planned on replacing them. They've got 110, 111 F-18As and Bs. They're capable but old, and they're going to be here for a total of 2,800 fighters. This is the most advanced, largest Air Force in the world. They've got 392 ground attacks, mostly A-10Cs and AV-8Bs for the Marine Corps. They've got another 157 bombers, 3 platforms, and the biggest thing with their bomber force, they're able to fire cruise missiles from range. That greatly increases their capabilities. They've got 493 transport planes for heavy and medium, which means they can transport equipment, logistics everywhere to go along with the Air Force bases. They've got a huge electronic warfare capabilities. Most of them the electronic warfare 18 F-18 with EF-18 Gs. They also have the world's largest airborne early warning, command and control, electronic intelligence, and ISR capabilities with 257 of those. They're able to track ground and air and forces throughout the world and anywhere in the world. They've got a huge area refueling capability with 530 tankers, which allows them to maintain forces 24/7. Allows them to have aerial dominance against pretty much any air force in the world. They can do any type of strike packages. They can keep combat air patrols in the air. They've got a huge. People don't realize how large their long-range cruise missiles, and long-range cruise missiles, I only count missiles that travel over 1,500 nautical miles. So they have 3,650 of them. They've got 137 military satellites, very advanced. They've huge ground-based capability with 114, so they can detect missiles and everything else throughout the world. Their pilots get like 350 hours of annual training plus deployment time. Well trained, great capability, great technology. Their fleet, the naval forces, they have 6 fleets, 151 major warships, which the pride of their force, the aircraft carriers, and their amphibious warfare capabilities. They've got cruisers, destroyers, and they're going to buy frigates. What they don't really have right currently is frigates, and also they don't really do corvettes. But when you add their Coast Guard to it, they have a huge amount of large patrol ships, which leads me to their 386 minor and coastal warships. Like I said, they have a lot of large patrol cruise ships. They just have a lot of capabilities. They have 53 conventional attack subs, all of which are nuclear powered. 49 of them are missile guided. The remaining 4 they're getting ready to retire, and they're just regular nuclear powered attack subs. They've got a huge anti-submarine warfare capability at 380. They've got 28 mine countermeasure capability. They're currently the world's largest shipbuilder, building currently 40 warships on the sea trial, another 40 on order. All said, they have the capability to do everything everywhere. But remember, even when you have the greatest military, you can still lose wars. Afghanistan is proof positive. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Army Life Old Man Fat Boy Style. I like to talk about some of the references I used for this. Of course, James Military Capability Modules, very expensive. It's like $1,200. That's not the total package is like $18,000 for everything to have full access to their whole database. But it's up to date and it's really amazing. It's a free plug for you, Jane. Give me a discount. I also want to give a shout out to the International Institute for Strategic Studies. I used their military balance 2018, 2019, 2020. Didn't pay for those. I also used Stockholm International Peace Resource Institute's database, and I used their yearbooks. These are great reference sources to help me to be able to come up with all this data, especially the training part. Once again, like, share, comment. Army Life Old Man Fat Boy Style. Talk to you guys later.